use the term.
I love doing bird photography.
Historical tourism.
Oh, that's an Ovenburg. We had an Ovenburg in that thing. Is that a
So it's been a thing for a long time.
No, that's a, no, it's a,
At the end of the day, I'll be a bartender.
it's the second time, we had it about a year ago, so I think you
All the
just
time we work my hands.
passing through.
I am trying
Oh, that's
to
nice.
put together
You. This is a bad surprise.
Right.
Anyway,
Georgian home,
yeah,
but then you
like
hear about the
one day
silver
next week we
wall,
need to, because I went
this and that.
We're living on borrowed
I
time.
went the first day, they were open, and then we had to wait an hour and a half, and that
So
was
I'm
fine.
coming to everything I hear about, that's historic preservation, learning, right, trying to put together.
I can see his point.
Not just him, I mean, it's, you know, locals, as they see,
Is to a regional and maybe people who did it and why it's done. And not what it's.
for what they had a good time.
Yes, it seems like most of I haven't gone on.
Oh, wow, that's kind of cool.
We're gonna have a long time again.
Just what do your dolls hang out with, yeah, so I have a four.
People are dressing up, I'm gonna go tonight, I'm gonna go open up the boxes. You know, I have the witches hat, you know, so, anyway, but it was nice to be able to. She's on the weekends, I'm like,
What has been you?
I haven't done this myself in a while.
there you go.
I've got a friend of mine in
Costume. I'm sure I have.
I used to have my dad's. I used to have
You can carry your skates or something.
Exactly.
But I used to have my dad's referee jersey, and I used to wear sunglasses and have a like referee, because most of them are.
Oh my gosh. Or something about that's crushed it, or something who's or something.
We can do that too. Just, it might be a way for, might be a way to get a boyfriend. I just got rid of one. I'm kind of enjoying that.
I get it.
But I mean, I guess I could also braid my things.
See, there you
That I did not wear from Wednesday happens. Anyway, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, so like I said, when I go,
That's fun.
it's just,
Yeah.
you know what I used to have? And I think it's hard to boxes. And I use
Yeah, that's, exactly short, so.
now.
That's, I think what's the matter
Whenever you're ready.
It was a great project.
I've done too.
Oh, yes, it's actually pretty things I
They were back from of course, the very end, right before the
All right, everybody's back. Hopefully you're not going to fall asleep after the lunch. So our next person was actually brought to our attention from one of our HPRB members. This is our third annual event, so if anyone knows of somebody that would be very interesting to hear from, make sure that you contact Gabe or myself, because we're always looking for that next round of speakers. So this is Daniel Shue. He's a native of Southwest Virginia who believes the best cities in America are those that preserve and protect their history through preservation and restoration, while also caring for its residents and downtown neighbors. He and his wife, Monica, put these beliefs into action by personally investing in Bristol, Virginia's historic buildings and providing homes where families can live comfortably, as well as short-term vacation properties to welcome people visiting the growing city. This effort has made an impact on the city by increasing property values for neighboring property owners, making streets safer, and eliminating derelict houses. Seems like he has something in common with our earlier speaker as well. So the Shue family lives in the Solar Hill Historic District, where they own 3 significant properties, including the historic King Mitchell House, which was built in 1816 as the main house overlooking the plantation in the valley, and that would later become downtown Bristol. In his work as a realtor, Daniel is known as the Old House Agent and specializes in homes built prior to 1930. He builds strong relationships and uses up-to-date technology to market properties. With the use of a skilled professional photographer and social media, your home can have the exposure it needs to sell quickly. So with that, if you all could welcome him and his presentation.
Put my water there without frying the computer or something. So I usually have a podium and I write a lot of stuff down because if I just speak off the cuff, I'll forget something. So forgive me while I have this here, but thank you for coming out to hear me. I know one gentleman drove pretty much from Richmond here, and I appreciate that, and appreciate you all having me. So as she mentioned, I'm a real estate agent that covers, I can basically cover any area between Knoxville and Roanoke. And I've been married to my beautiful wife, Monica, for 13 years now this month. We have a 6-year-old son named Rory, who was born acting and enjoys building things as much as his parents do. I grew up in a holler about 45 minutes from Bristol, about 30 minutes from Abingdon, in a little place called Clinchburg. It is where Saltville, Meadowview, and Glade Spring intersect. My parents had rebuilt their 1920s house after it burned, and because the house was damaged, they were able to fit it into their budget, and it became our home for 14 years. We didn't have with old houses on a tour of the Martha Washington at age 13, so today beginning there was nice and serendipitous. Around that same time, my mom went to work for a friend of hers at Crawford Antiques in Saltville, and through high school, right after Columbine, I was homeschooled, so I could go with her to the antique shop. And spending much time there, I began to have a very deep interest in all things that were here before I was. And my dream, after reading through many colonial homes magazines all day long after I finished my work, was to have a big old house and bring it back to life, and that we have done. After selling my business right here in Abingdon on Main Street that I started when I was 21, I entered the banking world and decided quickly that I have never lived my dream. I realized through deep thought that I always really wanted to be a real estate agent. But as I told our friend Elijah earlier, growing up in Saltville, that wasn't a real big place to make your fortune in real estate. So the next few years went well. I did my schooling while I worked at Home Depot on my lunch breaks. And I built a business, I made contacts, and got involved in my community. And in 2015, everything changed when we moved to Bristol, Virginia, that is. In 2020, I was sitting on the sofa with our son watching Blippi, locked in the house, and wondering if I would be alive tomorrow. And if something happened to me and I died from COVID, would I have done everything I wanted to do? And the answer to that was no. Around that same time, my broker surprised me with a book written by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. The book really taught me to think bigger than even my parents had taught me. The author's tagline was, if you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. Well, I loved real estate and I had a ton of knowledge and experience in my head about old houses. Maybe I could specialize in selling those old houses. So I left Blippi, got on the phone with my broker and said, I've got this crazy idea. What if I just represent people mostly that are selling or buying old houses? And she said, I've been waiting on you to say this for years. So she thought I was not crazy, and a few days later, it started with Facebook. I changed my name to the Old House Agent Daniel Shue, and I became the Old House Agent, just like Napoleon Hill said. And since then, as the Old House Agent, I've been in some of the most historic properties in our area. I've successfully sold many homes to people that have repaired them and given a whole new life to them. From Victorian houses in Bristol to the W.A. Stewart house, which Luke talked about earlier. I've been there to guide sellers through the fascinating process of finding a new owner. What I do is unusual. So my Facebook page has now grown to almost 20,000 followers in less than a year, and that has been a big change. Along the way, we have repaired or been involved with the sale and repair of over 30 historic houses in Bristol, Virginia alone. The one of those houses is our home, the King House. King House is the oldest house in Bristol. It was built in 1814. The house existed there long before Bristol was a place as the center of a large plantation, and an iron furnace. It was actually, we believe, the second oldest iron, let's see, what did they exactly call it? The Beaver Creek Iron Works is the second oldest ironworks in the state of Tennessee. 3 presidents have stayed in our home, along with apparently Robert E. Lee, which we've never been able to validate that. And without a deal struck in the north parlor of our house in the 1850s, Bristol would not exist today. The property housed some of Bristol's most prominent families until 1902, when a man named J.D. Mitchell, who was a descendant of George Washington, moved here with $2 in his pocket from Northern Virginia. He and his wife, Louise Mitchell, her family owned lots of property in Scott County, and her last name was Morrison. They purchased the house in 1902. We actually believe they may have purchased it in 1899, and they raised their 2 children there. Their daughter, Margaret, lived there for 99 years of her 102 years on this planet. Upon her death in 2004, the home was left to King University. The property and all its contents for the past 125 years were transferred to us in 2021, and we began a long restoration process. We've been living there since June. I was just telling David we got tired of waiting on the 5-year plan, so we said, well, there might be a bat in the house once in a while, but we're going to go ahead and jump on in. Have not seen a raccoon yet in the house. So we also own historic Pleasant Hill in Bristol, Virginia, and operate it as a vacation rental. Pleasant Hill was built in 1872 and later became the home of noted historian and author Bud Phillips. Have any of you ever heard of Bud Phillips?
Oh, yeah.
So without him, we would have lost much of Bristol's history. We call it the museum you can stay in. The whole idea of this house, I was actually inspired by Field's Pen House when it was a house museum. So while other teenagers were listening to P. Diddy, I wanted to open a house museum. And so we patterned this very similarly. So you go in and everything is set up just as it could have been in 1872, down to children's toys. But you can sit on everything. And you can sleep there and eat breakfast there. So there are still many properties in Bristol that are in need of repair, and I will continue to list them for sale, work with buyers, and personally invest with them, much to Monica's chagrin, to make sure they're safe. When I'm not working on a house or selling one, you can find me chairing the Bristol, Virginia Planning Commission. I also coordinate programs for the Bristol Historical Association. The president might say that I do that badly, but I try. Or work on the Bristol, Virginia Preservation Awards Committee, in which I've been chairing since last year. Historic preservation is deeply important when it comes to sustainable growth. It can conserve resources, reduce the need for infrastructure, and reduce waste in landfills. You'd be absolutely surprised, and shocked at how much construction debris goes into landfills from demolition. It's astonishing. The use of high-quality materials can increase value as well as increase tourism in an area. It helps us learn more about building techniques that can help us in modern construction, and it helps us recognize and/or celebrate our past. Some of it we don't want to celebrate. If you're like me, you can hear your grandmother saying something like, "That old snake pit," or "You can't heat those old houses." And this is simply not true. I heard some talk about windows earlier, and I was excited to cover this. Old houses can be insulated, caulked, and properly repaired to be just as efficient as new buildings. We have lived in 6 houses predating 1922 since we were married in 2011. I know that hurts you to think that, all that moving. And we have never been cold. Forget those vinyl windows too. In 2011, the Window Preservation Standards Collaborative discussed the issue of old windows. They had testing done by a third party, certified by the Building Performance Institute according to the ASTM E1186-03 2009 standards. All of these single-pane, double-hung windows exceeded the 2009 requirements, and all but one exceeded the 2012 IECC Energy Code requirements, because most of your heat in a house actually goes up. So if you have good insulation in your attic, your windows aren't that big of a problem. And vinyl windows have to be replaced like every 25 years. So why would you put a window in you got to replace in your lifetime when you can repair one that was there before you? I remember the a lovely couple restored the Bristol, Virginia post office. They have these huge windows, and of course I thought they were in good condition because I'm used to looking at trash windows. And the couple fixing it said that they were going to replace them. I threw up in my mouth a little bit, backed up, composed myself, and I said, okay, listen, don't do that. I really think you can repair these. They still work. They're in good condition. So she called me back a month later and thanked me because it was going to be $2,000 a window to replace them with vinyl, and they restored them for $500 a window. So that's a big difference. Now, and I've got room for questions at the end, so if you all have any questions about this stuff, just hang in there. So who buys old houses? Where we'll get to the real estate part. People who like old houses have a number of things in common, including people that buy old houses are usually fascinated with old things and may feel a connection to the past for a myriad of reasons. They have great imaginations and may believe that old houses have stories to tell, whether it's a simple story about a farmer or something larger like a political figure staying there. They all have a story. They have an appreciation for character. Handmade woodwork, wide plank floors, and wavy glass can all play into this romantic vision that some may have of these historic homes. This is definitely me in a nutshell. They enjoy challenges. Repairing things and bringing them back to the way they were can make restoration feel like the house has buried treasure in it. Actually, there's a great video, and I was afraid it would go viral, of Monica doing, she videoed a tour that I did of a house I have listed at 410 Stone Mill Road. It's built in 1827, and I posted pictures of it, and this gentleman commented and said, "Oh, there's a hidden staircase in that house." I said, "Sir, if there was a hidden staircase in that house, their realtor would know about it." He said, "I promise, I went in there in the 60s, there was a staircase, I saw it with my own eyes. This man pushed on the door, it opened up, and there was this steep staircase up the wall." So in the video, we're going through the whole house, we get halfway through, and there's a closet beside the fireplace. So, because the homeowner had no idea either, and she is not here, she was here earlier. And so I open the closet, we're talking about the way these shelves are curved. I said, "Oh, check out, that shelf looks weird." And I shut the door, and then my brain clicked, and I opened it back up and just about had a heart attack because there was the mark of the staircase inside the closet. So that was a really cool thing to find out. So I definitely have a romantic vision of these places. And it can be psychological as well as, I call it spiritual, frankly. They have an awareness of the seasons. Don't laugh at that. They know how to adapt to them. So like wood-burning fireplaces and the subtle popping of a radiator all help you to appreciate each season and what it means. In my experience, I've tried to find some statistics on this, and I could not find anything about it. That is just like me to Google something someone's never heard of before. But in my experience, I have found that people that like old houses usually have a higher education, so a master's degree or PhD or something like that, which I do not have. So coming on down to the value of old houses and the resale aspect of that. Although you may pay for their charm and individuality, old homes still cost significantly less upfront, that's the key, than their counterparts. The price of newly built homes is often higher than that of older homes by a staggering 30%. One client of mine was asking about his $450,000 house, how many times it was shown this week. It was built in 1905, and you know, we had to talk about how most houses in Bristol that are $450,000 are new construction, so he's a little bit of a unicorn. If you purchase an old home that may even need some work, chances are you are going to get more bang for your buck with the addition of charm and character. So this is what really sets me apart from other agents, is the pricing of old houses and how to protect them. Most people that call me, they are not, even though I usually can sell their house fast, they're not calling me to sell their house fast or calling me to get more money. They care about what happens to their house. And so they understand that quality and they respect history. Needless to say, many of my sellers want the home to not only go into good hands, but they want some assurance that the property won't be neglected or worse, demolished for new construction. This is always a challenge, but there are things that you can do as a seller to help protect your old house and get people to do the right thing. One of these things is called a deed restriction. A deed restriction can restrict future owners from doing lots of things to the property. Demolition, conversion to apartments, and turning a house into a business are all things that can be limited with a deed restriction. Unfortunately, they're not highly enforceable, so some people also opt for an affidavit or something that they can make someone sign at closing. These are not discriminatory practices. You are not basing this on anything about the person except you want the house to go into hands that will protect it. Another thing that helps is to have the building put on the National Trust for Historic Preservation. While this doesn't always protect the building from demolition, it can be a substantial roadblock for a buyer who intends to do the wrong things. I cannot count how many times I have gotten phone calls yeah, you know that house you have listed on Solar Street? What can't I do to it? To which I automatically reply to the sellers and say, this person is asking about what they can or can't do, so you probably don't want to sell it to them. That's never a good sign that someone has the right idea in mind for them. And unfortunately on Solar Hill where we live, we do not have restrictions like here in Abingdon. Let's see here. So the main way I help my clients and the way they trust me to help their home go to restoration-minded people is proper pricing. The goal in this strategy is never to price gouge or abuse buyers. The point is to help them understand value. For instance, one property that I currently have listed is called Stony Point in Burgonsville, Tennessee. It's right there. It is the second oldest brick structure in the state of Tennessee. The property has been in the Armstrong family since it was built in 1789 from a land grant. The family wanted a new owner for it because they had no plans of restoration and they had no plans to live there, so they sought me out. There are not many comps for a 5,000 square foot, 1789 mansion filled with original furniture sitting on 4 acres in desperate need of repair. My first order of business was to get a value of the land. That is in an incredibly beautiful area. This is not a property that you will look at online and then pull in and go, oh, this is not what the pictures look like. That is a phenomenally beautiful part of Tennessee, and there are new houses being built all around it. So I had to get the land value down first, and then I had to get an idea of how much demolition would cost on a property this large. And demolition is actually quite a bit more expensive than you would think. You don't just knock a house down, you pay to have a house knocked down. I had to get in the dark, creepy mind of someone who would tear down an old building. I came up with a number of about $600,000 total. If you bought that land and tore the house down, that's probably pretty much what you would have in it. So in order to increase our chances of finding a preservation-minded buyer, we needed to price it at around $1 million. They decided to go with 1.2. To which we have had a pretty good response from preservationists saying that they thought with the house's history and size and the amount of stuff inside that was a pretty fair price. I was actually glad to get that kind of feedback because it was an interesting situation. So will it sell for that? I don't know, only time will tell. But I can say that because of this pricing strategy, it is only attracting serious buyers. Another property, well, yeah, a lot of people that haven't seen it online, I keep getting the phone calls of, hey, I was just driving by and saw that old farmhouse up on the hill. What are y'all asking for that? So we know that's probably, they probably do not want to restore that. So, let's see. Another property that I used this on sold last year. The sellers were offered anywhere from $12,000 to $25,000 for a historic house on 1 acre before I came along, and they thought that was too cheap for what it was. Using this same formula, I came up with a list price of $149,900 to discourage anyone who had bad intentions or had intentions of demo and create a situation where the investment was much too large for the buyer to not repair it, or they would be wasting $150,000 buying it. I was very clear with people when they called about it. I had lots of phone calls from people in this town that would say, you know, I think I can fix it. What's it going to cost? $20,000. And to which I would reply, that's just what the chimney's going to cost. So that was another thing I worked really hard with this committee on, is explaining to people before I drove 45 minutes to show it that they were going to invest $200,000 or more in this house. And that just saved everybody some time. And so the right buyer came along and was not intimidated by the price. She made an offer, and we all settled for $115,000. The house is now under restoration and has another 150 years of life left. This probably would not be the answer for a 1920 brick bungalow that sits in the middle of other bungalows and would likely be a ridiculous situation for a seller, and it would hurt people in desperate need of housing. So this does not work everywhere. This is for big old houses that need lots of money put in them. So marketing old houses. This is my free advertising here, but I have to, let you all know how it came to this. 3 words: real estate magazines. Got a slide, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's one missing. Well, it was a laughing emoji, because that's a total lie.
No, we decided to take that off.
Okay. I am totally kidding. Those things are dead. In 2020, I stopped using them because houses would go under contract or sometimes even close before the real estate magazine even came out. I have never looked back. Websites like Zillow and Realtor have made house hunting very simple for folks. Social media is big and is only getting bigger. It is very important that your realtor to increase exposure of your home by posting it on their business page at the very least. Facebook and Instagram have become the go-to for people that enjoy old houses and can potentially buy one. I think we learned that from Luke and Michelle earlier. I offer walkthrough videos and a reel for every one of my old house listings. These videos are quite raw and people love them. I have a small TV show on BTN, which is the Bristol, Tennessee network, called The Old House Agent. This show goes on YouTube and to cable viewers in Bristol, Tennessee. When these professionally filmed videos done by a trained videographer come out, I get to copy them and post them onto my Facebook page. And I can tell you 100% of the time, without fail, my raw videos get 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 10 times more views. Some reels of ours reach up to 300,000 people or more. People love personal posts as well. By posting about the restoration of our home, I have engaged viewers and followers on a deeper level. Because of this, I have made quite a few new friends. My page has now become a place where people can learn about local history and architecture and maybe, just maybe, find their old home. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only agent in the country that does what I do exactly. It doesn't matter how old your house is or how period the decor. There is a 99.9% chance you are going to sell it because of the internet. Do not make your agent buy expensive ads in magazines, newspapers, or ask them to have open houses. You want an agent who knows how to use the internet. In closing, selling an old house is very different from suburban homes or ranch houses. It requires expertise, knowledge, and passion. You must connect people to like-minded people. You must understand the value and how buyers understand that value. Unfortunately, I just lost a sale today because a lady was very concerned about whether the house was worth it or not, and sure enough, somebody came in. You have to be very transparent with buyers so that they do not destroy their finances trying to repair a home that they cannot afford. This hurts people involved and could potentially cause the house to be demolished. Commission-driven real estate practices are prevalent, but in the coming years, I would like to bring passion, mindfulness, and community involvement to my profession. I hope that you all have learned something new today and you look at the value of old houses differently. I promise only half of that was written. So anybody have any questions? Yes, David?
Yeah, you got a unique situation that you live right there in Bristol. So you have Tennessee and you have Virginia. 2 questions, I guess, is one is, what is it like selling on both sides? And then from a historical district, does Tennessee treat it better than the Virginia side or vice versa?
So Tennessee, that's a great question because I've been finding out more about that lately. They actually have some guidelines in place, and they're just guidelines from the Secretary of Interior. So you can kind of do whatever you want to, but they're saying please don't do something bad. Virginia does not have anything like that right now, so we're trying to adopt that, especially on Solar Hill. Yeah, we're having infill on Solar Hill for the first time in 60 years. Luckily, the first house that has been built looked okay. They brought it to Planning Commission, and we all looked at each other and said, well, it looks good, so let's do it, because they had to get it approved. It was like a 0.01 acre under. So there's not a whole lot to help with that right now. That's kind of why I got into this, is because I knew that showing people value of these houses and getting people into town that would fix them was about the only way we could save them. The city, especially Bristol, Virginia, has taken about 10 or 12 years ago, they did some blight reduction. I mean, I know they really had to do it probably, but they tore down like whole blocks of houses. These were huge houses. So yeah, there is a little bit of a difference on the Tennessee side. I think the majority of the older houses may be on the Virginia side. But yeah, other than that, it's just your basic real estate laws are a little different. There's more forms in Tennessee than there is Virginia.
Now, the more houses down there, late 1800s, early 1900s, isn't that more the heyday of Bristol?
Yeah, heyday of Bristol was definitely like 1880 to 1905 was like the big time. Yes, ma'am.
What does Bristol have in place as far as historic preservation boards?
Nothing.
So when you're giving out these awards that you give out, what do you, are
So,
you on a committee? Do you?
Yeah, so we have 5 historic districts, and although we have now found out that 2 or 3 of them are not included in a historic overlay, they're suggested historic districts. But Solar Hill is on the National Registry where we live. So one area we are fighting to protect right now is the Virginia Hill District, which goes from the town hall to behind Virginia Intermont College. That area is very important, and there is really nothing that can stop you from tearing down a building over there right now. So we're in desperate need of getting that overlay done now, and they're in the process of working with the city on that. But yeah, the awards committee, that was just, it is a city committee, but Catherine Brillhart, she was a former mayor, and she and Andrew Trivett sort of made that happen and used their own time and skills for that. So.
Well, are they trying to do anything at VI?
There's actually a group that we are sort of involved in called VI Forward, and it is being formed as a 501c3 to try to purchase the college and create housing and different things over there. So I hope you see something on WCYB soon to where you're like, whoa. Yes, Rick.
I hate to be remiss and not mention also that Catherine Brillhart is a former Abingdonian. So she
That's right,
here
she
with
is,
me
isn't
for
she?
yes.
She is quite a person. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I work for DHR. I'm Mike's colleague. I'm
Awesome.
the certified local government coordinator. So I know I'm familiar with some of you, but I would like to address kind of the Bristol question. I know Bristol,
Please do.
Tennessee has their downtown, which is right on the other side, Virginia, is an overlay district. So they have been in contact with me, people in Tennessee, to help try to encourage Bristol to do something similar. Maybe not as strict as what a overlay would be, but possibly. But that's been a while. I think COVID and things have kind of pushed everybody back a little bit. But just so you know, there has conversations, but it's come from the Tennessee side.
Yeah, it's very early. Do you know the name Whitney Manahan?
No, I think.
So she has said that she spoke with Mike in the past couple of weeks
so.
about it. So it's very, very early. But yeah, that was when we realized Virginia Intermont was not really protected. We all kind of freaked out.
So there is talk. So.
Yeah, good. Yes, ma'am.
We're from Blumpville Historic District in Sullivan County. In the heart of Blumpville is the old Deer Inn on the National Register in our overlay district. But in the back, one of our historic structures was relocated from the King Iron Works.
Yeah.
So I guess your home, we have one of your structures in our back.
Yeah, I want that back.
Well, you can come visit whenever. We'll give you a key.
I think we have a picture of it in its original location.
Ooh, I would love to see that.
Yeah, I'll have to dig that out.
That's great. Did you have a question about that? Or?
No, I
Okay.
just wanted to share that with
Just
you.
brag.
I think it's
Yeah, I was very excited to step in there for the first time.
Probably taken about 1900.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I would love to see that if you can email me. Yes, Jill?
I'm not sure how to ask this, or probably, but, you know, when it comes to appraisals of older homes, it seems like sometimes there's a lack of knowledge or a lack of education and there can be a real gap unless you have somebody to come in or a real learning curve on that.
Definitely.
Is there any suggestions on, not that I want to sell anything, but at the same time, it's,
Yeah, so I think the biggest deal is, you know, appraisers, a good appraiser does recognize quality, and these houses do have them. So, you know, I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're asking, but if you are selling a house and you're concerned about an appraisal, just make sure your rooms are set up like they're supposed to be, everything's clean, just like you normally would, but accentuate the character of your house.
well, even buying something that needs to be, you know, just, you know, for people that are getting out loans or whatever, it's, you know,
Yeah, it's tough when...
It's a tricky, it's kind of a...
It is. We had a problem on Solar Hill, actually. When we moved there, we paid $165,000 for our house, and I told Monica the houses up there would be $500,000 in 5 years, and sure enough, last year one brought 5. And then you know, then there was one that was 132 because she wanted to sell it fast, and that changed the value of everybody's house when it came to an appraisal point of view. So it is very tricky, and actually I don't really have any good answers about that. And you can't handpick an appraiser either.
See, that's just,
yeah.
you can't say, oh, we need it.
Yeah.
But it almost looks like there needs to be somebody that has at least that experience.
Yeah.
That you can say, hey, you know, this is historic house, you know.
Yes, sir.
There's very few appraisers in this area anyway, and we've actually had, with some of our properties, we've actually had multiple appraisals just to check it out, and there is a significant difference on what they come
Now,
back.
John Mahaffey is an appraiser also, as well as a broker, and John likes old houses, and he has always seemed to come in on a value that I thought was very appropriate. Now, when it comes to home inspectors, you know, legally, if I'm talking to you as a client, I'm supposed to give you like 3 or something, but there's a gentleman around here who is actually a contractor. His name is David Wall, and if you ever need a inspection done by him, he's just like no bull about these things. He tells you if it's a good house or not, along those same lines. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the King House? It's the state line house that sits...
E.W. King House, yes.
Okay. Who owns that, and what's going to be done with it, and does that fall under Bristol, well, I guess it's Bristol, Tennessee?
It's Bristol, Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah,
Any
so
idea what's the...
that lady may be able to help out a little bit
Okay.
more if I can't, but I don't know what exactly, if that's in a commercial district or what, but I do know what's going on with it. So the Historical Association, we are not known for buying houses and remodeling them. We're known for keeping them from being torn down.
Right.
And so the I.C. Fowler House was purchased by them and resold. It's now restored. And the E.W. King House was saved by the Bristol Historical Association.
Okay.
And so then we sold it to the gentleman that owns Honeydew.
Okay.
He did a huge restoration on it. And it's saved, it's still standing. And the outside looks good. And a local couple that have some McDonald's in the area bought it for their headquarters. Actually, she loves old houses. I know her really well. So it's a good thing. So, as a matter of fact, she has told me that the garage is going to be a museum that her teenage son is going to do with World War II artifacts. So, yeah, it's good hands.
Okay, interesting, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I just want to point out that the gentleman who did the restoration of E.W. King House has the same name as me, and it's not me, so.
It's the Honeydew guy?
Yeah.
You have the same name? That's not a joke?
It's the same, yes, that's correct.
Tell him what it is.
Well, I'm Michael, he's Mike.
Gotcha.
But, you know, that's...
So I don't even know if he had an architect that works with him. I'm not sure. The only thing they did that I didn't like was that they replaced the windows. The rest of it did pretty well. I think he took out a staircase, but I never saw it. He said that it was in bad condition. But yeah, are you adding something, Michael?
No, don't call me.
Stop blaming you.
That's right. No, like I said, it looks good outside. He did a great job on the brickwork, and it's good. It's good. Any other questions?
And that's that, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you all very much for hearing me.
Very good.
If you guys want to get up and stretch your legs for 5 minutes and then come back, and then we'll get the next one started.
I was Googling
So what I can do is just see how quick information it is. Okay.
Thank you. And I found what you said to be very true, because my parents owned a house back in 2 acres, and so people are like, oh, guess what, I mean, something on that church. It's been preserved for the last 5 years. To say it's not enough, we don't.
Gosh, there's one in downtown Bristol. Their agent actually built this house. Could be good restored or demolished, something like that.
Yeah, how can you do that? And, you know, the way I look at it is, what if it's there he's your guy. Yeah, that's what I was saying. So, thank you.
You are.
I'm Valerie. I'll give you a call. And I'll remind you. Thank you.
Hey, it's
Okay, you might be someone to go to a movie with. You're the man. You know.
Oh, I'm upstairs. Yeah, so I don't.
Yeah, it's and I mean, I just kept saying to them, told me that.
Hello? Yes. Your favorite topic, Donna Marie?
Yes.
All right, so now you get to hear from Gabe and I, because JMT, who did our Sinking Spring Cemetery Preservation Plan, was not able to come today. So we still wanted to go through this project with you all. So how many people have spent time in Sinking Spring Cemetery other than Donna Marie? How many have gone to Donna Marie's Haint Mistress? All right. She has a wonderful program that she puts on that goes through the history of Abingdon from I don't really want to, I would say from a ghost perspective?
A gossip perspective.
A gossip perspective. So she was the first gossip girl, and at least we have that great tradition. So Sinking Spring Cemetery is basically diagonal, so if you just went down Valley, it's right at the end of the road. It has been there since, the 1700s. We have many different eras that of bodies that are buried there, and we are still burying people to this day. So it is an active cemetery, which people find interesting. And we don't have a whole lot, maybe a couple a year, but we definitely, it's still an active cemetery. I'll just say a couple of things. If you go over there and take a look at it right now, you'll see these orange barrels that are out there. So when Helene came through a couple weeks ago, it was sort of a sad moment, or we looked over there and we saw a giant tree had fallen. So while cemeteries are beautiful and they look fantastic when they have these big old trees, it's actually extremely scary and slightly nerve-wracking when a huge storm comes in like Helene. So we only lost one tree. We used a group of people called Wolf Hills Restoration, and they were able to come in and basically very carefully lift the tree off after we had gone out there and marked all the stones, put barrels over the ones we could protect. We had actually moved other stones off that had fallen over and numbered them so that we can actually put it all back together. And then we did a really fun, exciting thing, and we called for volunteers to come out and help us move brush and try to be very careful and particular about how we were working around the stone. So you don't quite realize the importance of having an emergency management plan or planning in general for a cemetery until you end up with a cemetery that's as old and as valuable to our community as this one is. So how did this all start? How did we end up with a cemetery master plan? Well, there is something called the Sinking Spring Cemetery Board, and they provide an annual report to the town council. So this was about 3 years ago when I had first started as the community development director, and they came to the town council and they dropped a bag of chipped pieces of stone on the table in a dramatic bang and said, "The cemetery is not being taken care of." And there's sort of like silence, and everyone's looking around the room like, well, who's gonna step up and take care of the cemetery? And I think Cam, our attorney, said, well, Mayanna could do that. I think she could do that, right? And so I had the honor of taking up the Sinking Spring Cemetery as another item on our list. What our 2 years in, we ended up having a new town manager that came in, and we still had a lot of tough conversations about the cemetery, and I think what he really specifically said was, we can do better. That's what he said. He's like, we can do better. There's got to be a way that we can really look at this cemetery and figure out what we want to do, and how we can make people not bring in piles of chipped pieces of stones. So our first battle was with Public Works, and I say battle because now that I have become the assistant town manager, they're one of my departments and they're very lovely people, but at the time it was like, who's running into the stones, who's doing that? And so we have upright stones, we also have flat stones. And so the first thing was a very physical conversation. It was like, well, okay, well, what are we really trying to say? What do we really want to have happen here? And it was like, well, lift the blades of the mowers. You know, lift the blades of the mowers. Like, why do we have to mow like within a ½ inch of the grass? Like, what does that do? Sure, we're mowing out there every week, but why do we have to go and just, you know, why do we have this blade that's so low? Okay, sure, we can lift the blade of the mower. So then we said, all right, the second question is, why do we have to get so close to the stones every week? Can we not basically create a buffer around the stones and not mow right up against the stones with the large pieces of equipment? Well, yeah, okay, we can create a buffer around the stones. And then, you know, the idea, or the thing that we were told was, we're not using metal pieces of weed eaters, and yet we definitely saw pieces of metal in the weed eater string that was found in the cemetery. And so we said, well, again, what can we do to change that? And then we talked to them and said, what about having, you know, specific weed eaters that are for this area? So our first step in saving the cemetery wasn't a lofty dream or some big idea or a master plan. Our first step was, let's change the way we mow. So we started with that. We started leaving the buffers. We started not mowing as often, because while it looks great, it really isn't truly necessary to mow every day or every week. They have 200 acres of other properties we own, like the muster grounds, cemeteries, road right-of-ways, so their job is to get it done as fast as possible. It wasn't meant to be disrespectful. It wasn't meant really for anything other than you're putting the earphones in, you're mowing the property, you're moving on to the next one. So when we had that conversation, we said, now you're gonna have a buffer, now you're gonna do some other things, and it worked great. That was the first step. Then we got a little pushback from the board again that said, well, now it looks a little ratty. Like, why is there a buffer around each of these stones? Why are you not mowing every week? And we said, well, we are trying to protect the stones. You know, we're actually trying to ensure that we don't have a weed eater right up against the stone. We don't have a large piece of machinery up against the stone. We aren't mowing down to where we're nicking the flat stones. And so that's when we decided to do something called adopt a plot. When we first came up with the idea, we had kind of looked around at some different other locations that had cemetery repair, and you know, it varies. Like, some people have had somebody who's taken care of the cemetery for years. Some people have made them into almost like commercial ventures where they have gazebos and special events. We looked at goats, sheep, all of it. And so we said, well, you know, what if the areas that are most particular and precious and need to be saved are these interior family plots? They have a border. They're very difficult to mow. So what if, instead of trying to come up with a large-scale solution, what if instead we do a grassroots solution? And so we put out a request, and we got a program together. In fact, Jessica, who's running our videography behind here, she did a beautiful website for us. We took a picture of every family plot, and we put them up for adoption. We said, if you want to come out and help us save the cemetery, what we're asking for you to do is put some sweat equity into it. Adopt one of these plots, or multiples. And so we'll keep doing the mowing on the outer edge. If you adopt a plot and it grows up too tall, we'll still help you out there. But again, can we physically change the way we're taking care of the cemetery? And so I'm happy to say that we're probably 3/4 of the way through the adoptions, and every time you if you adopt a plot, you get a t-shirt, you get a ceremony, and on the website we put a lovely, you know, ribbon to say that the plot has been adopted. It's been so successful that we actually had a group come in a couple weeks ago to ask about the program, and have some students come through, and we are now, they want to take that and use that as an example at their cemetery as well. So I think that was our first, our first steps was let's physically try to figure this out. So then we said, okay, if this cemetery has been here for 250 years and we're doing all these great things, if we're not here, and I don't just mean Gabe and I, but if the board changes or your town council changes or any other changes happen, how could we actually ensure that what we're doing now would continue onward? And so we said, well, that would probably be an actual preservation plan. So I think a lot of you, we're talking about zoning ordinances, we're talking about historic preservation guidelines, like we're kind of all in the world of understanding that in order to protect something, the best, safest way is to have a plan, is to have guidelines, is to say, here's what it is and here's how we're going to take care of it. So I was talking earlier about how we're doing this annually. We went through that same process. We applied for a CLG grant through DHR, and we said, we really want to save this 250-year-old cemetery. Will you give us a grant to do that work? And so we got the grant, we did the matching, and then we went through the adoption and RFP process. We received, I think, 3 proposals. We ended up interviewing 2 groups. Donna Marie assisted with that. So for those of you who have boards, I always say there's no reason for staff to make those decisions. By all means, bring your boards, bring your people in, because again, there's a lot more buy-in from the community if everyone's doing it. It's not behind the scenes. Staff isn't secretly picking who they want. One group didn't quite have the same, I guess I would say, technical skills, but JMT really seemed to be the one that could get here on the ground. I'm just going to read off who they are. They're a cultural resource group that works on a combination of architectural history, historic preservation, archaeology, public history, and public participation. Cultural resource staff are qualified for positions they hold as outlined by the Secretary of Interior's professional qualification standards. So that was a big part of why we chose them as well. And so what they did is they created a Sinking Spring Cemetery Preservation Plan, and I'm going to let Gabe go through and describe exactly the steps that they took, what they did on the ground, and then what the final product was that they gave us.
So the first part is,
I'm a little shorter than
there we go. That's better now. Okay. So the first part was to have this plan, and preservation plans or any sort of usually plan with preservation, it's a living document. So it can always be updated, changed, amended, especially when you're doing repairs to certain things, you're going to want to log that into your plan. So that's the main part, is to make a living blueprint for this site. The project purpose was to survey and inventory all accessible grave markers. So you can't really know what you're preserving until you know what you got. So we had to make sure we had everyone cataloged, and so that included, taking pictures of the stones, the condition, and the location, everything. And I'll get more to that with another slide. The outline maintenance needs for grave markers. So ones are they just need some cleaning. Other ones need some extra TLC where you need to either connect 2 pieces together, reset them. So there's all varying degrees of care that some need. Establish a repair and cleaning procedures for common grave marker conditions, e.g. biological growth, soiling, or cracking. So soiling, it could either be black, green, tan, it could be anything like that. Biological growth is, you'll see like what I call like those lichens, or it looks like moss on it. You don't want those on the stones because those hold moisture, and so that could hurt your stones as well. Establish proper procedures for repair and maintenance of above-ground infrastructure, including the roads, the pedestrian pathways, and structures. We have a cabin there. It's known as the Parson Cummings cabin, but it's not his specific cabin where he lived. It's from his property. So it has some connection because Charles Cummings, who was the first reverend of the congregation Sinking Springs Presbyterian Church, is buried in this cemetery. So it has some connection there. So it's not just for the headstones, it's for the pathways, the cabin, the fencing, anything that's connected to that site. And then address landscape management. So I mentioned we had a tree down. So in November here, I'll be going out with our arborist, Kevin Sigmund, and we'll be denoting what trees are dead or need trimming so we can avoid and be proactive to make sure no damage happens. Some of the content, so we'll have a historical narrative. So that pretty much just breaks down the history of this site, dating back to when it was actually used as a church area and then as it's progressed into a cemetery. An inventory of all the grave markers. Again, we were told at certain points when me and Maya first came on that the GIS layer is wrong. You don't know where the markers are. So we said, okay, we'll just have it re-surveyed again. This way we know for certain everything's there. Maintenance plan, as I said, is to make sure every grave marker will know which one has what condition and we'll know what best way to take care of it. Proposed edits to the town ordinance, and then a funding and revenue plan to look at possible ways of funding the repair of these tombstones. There's one program that allows for $5 per stone if you're listed in the state statute, but again, some might require more.
$5 isn't going to get you far.
So again, the historical narrative, it was ran for just specifically the Singing Spring Cemetery section. Deed research was done and records to clarify ownership. Independent research was done by JMT on the cemetery and the church. Research was conducted in person and in conjunction with the site survey. And then potential research sources could include the records of the Historical Society of Washington County and the Washington County Recorder of Deeds. And that is a picture of the DHR marker, highway marker that's right in front of the site.
Can you tell them about the 3 different sections and why we needed the deed information?
So we technically have 3 different sections. I'm not sure when they came into being named, but we have first circle, second circle, and pen addition. And there was a 4th one Don Marie told me about. It's Scott Campbell is at the far north. That's more of the modern area where you see a lot of granite tombstones. And so we were going through, we kind of know that we own it and everything, but we didn't have like a breakdown exactly of the deed research that shows it. So we had that done just to make sure, and it's in the plan too, so in case when me and my are going, that question comes up again, we'll go to the appendix, it's right there, there's the deeds, there's the breakdown of it.
And because it's an active cemetery, I think that's one of the pieces, that we've kind of struggled with like, who can clean which stone? Is it your stone? Is it your stone? Is there an ownership level that we don't quite understand? So that deed research is just extremely important for us to say, yeah, the town of Abingdon owns it. We can basically implement these rules, regulations, and policies and procedures.
Inventory of grave markers. So they use a survey method. It's using a Survey 123. It's a GIS application. So pretty much they would go around with tablets near where the stone is. You hit collect, and it collects a pinpoint, GIS location or a GPS locational pinpoint there. And so to that point, it has all kinds of information attached to it. So we had a previous GIS layer, and some of the information was very basic, not up to my standard of recording. So we made sure to have photographs of each side of the stone, the marker type, so there's different sort of marker types. Some are obelisks, some are monuments, some are just headstones, some are flat tops. The marker material, so some, since they're older, some we have as slate, limestone. The newer ones are granite. Those are a lot denser, so they don't get chipped as easily. The slate, the limestone, and all the historical ones, they're more susceptible to how Mike was saying earlier this morning about the salts being in the stone. We're in a climate where we're not just all warm all the time, or we're all cold. We get warm and cold. So it expands and contracts, and then eventually you'll see a stone pop and it'll fall over. And so sometimes we've had the board members would come and say, the stone just fell, somebody, and I looking at it, I'm like, no, it had salts in it, it had this, it's just the weather, and that's just the climate we're in. So, the name of the deceased, birth, death dates, and inscriptions. The inscriptions could be, to my loving wife of 50 years, or it could be if a newborn baby died, something like that to really capture that, because when I was in grad school, we worked with a synagogue, KKVE, and they had a whole book of all the information and the inscriptions. So if one got damaged or destroyed, they could replicate it with exactly all the inscriptions that they had. So that was kind of our thinking of, if ever one got damaged beyond belief, like if the tree took one out, we would know what it said. General conditions, so that could be, does it just have biogrowth on it? Is it staining? Is it cracked? Is it leaning? Should we worry about settlement issues where the stone could break over the pressure? So all those kind of good details. And site features such as curbing, as Mana said, we have some that are in close family plots, whether it's a gate, brick, or concrete. Fencing, and we have a few plaques in there based on, they're like ones that you stick in the ground because we have 11 Revolutionary War soldiers buried there. 9 we know for certain of the locations, the other 2 have not been found yet, so that's kind of a little interesting tidbit there for that one. Inventory of the grave markers, again on site, they just used their tablets, they went through, they were here starting on March 11th and continued through March 15th, so it was about a week's time. And so throughout the process, I would go out there and make sure if they had any questions, concerns, or how the process should go, and we're just overlooking to make sure they're following what we wanted. And then they were there all day, and sometimes even at the nighttime portion. Pretty much until you couldn't read the stone, they were there at that point. So. The resulting inventory is produced by GIS application, like I said. The photographs were collected, and the information was captured. Again, I can't reiterate this enough, is that you can't preserve what you don't know what you have until you know what you have. So that was the main goal of this, and again, it's 250 years old, and me and Mana came on and said, we don't have a strict plan for this yet. We need to have a living document where we can check off, oh, yep, Charles Cummings' stone got cleaned in 2024. It'll be in the plan then, so we have that. Once field work was completed, JMT made recommendations regarding the preservation of the cemetery to include potential remedial treatments for a range of conditions noted over the course of the survey and for appropriate ongoing maintenance. The survey was conducted in accordance with the recommendations made based on the National Park Service Historic Preservation Brief, number 48, preserving grave markers in historic cemeteries. So again, Mike highlighted this in the morning, but those preservation briefs are invaluable. Some are on the older side, some are newer. I think substitute materials just got revised this past year or two. And so those are something to really, that's a wealth of knowledge that, you know, before you do a project or anything, just refer to those. The plan addresses appropriate rules and regulations for special events, methods to address security and vandalism, and provide recommendations for capital improvements based on the survey and inventory.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So we have some interesting things that the police department have found out there. So people will go out there and put candles, knives, gifts, all kinds of different things into different varied ones of the stones that we have. So that specifically is part of this plan, how to handle vandalism. The other thing that we had a very interesting conversation with was doggy bags. So it's fenced in, and there was sort of this desire at the time to put dog bags in. However, we said it's not a dog park. Not that that you couldn't have a dog there. However, by encouraging more dog activity there, you're actually going to end up with dogs peeing on stones. You know, you're going to end up with people that don't clean up after their pets. And so there is a lot of discussion about deciding not to actually encourage more dog activity. So it was kind of like a hard one to decide on, because you think, well, you want bags in case they do, but you don't actually really want more dogs there. And then as far as security goes, we've talked about it for a long time. The police department, basically the rules had said from dawn to dusk that it was open. And so that also created a kind of a bizarre thing, because the police department would have to go open it and then have to go close it. And then if it's not opened or if it's not closed, you know, who's concerned about that? So that's, again, what the plan addresses, is all those sort of like nuanced decisions that can come and go based on who's your police chief, or, you know, who's your town manager, or who's making the decision. So that, again, the whole idea was, what are the methods, what are the types of activities, and then what do we all agree on right now when there's so much interest in the cemetery?
So the funding and revenue plan, a funding and revenue plan for the continued preservation of the cemetery was developed in consultation with the town and the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. So that's just to say, like, what grants are out there, what other ways can we get funding? Just because, as my aunt said, some stones, $5 is not gonna work for those. You'll have to hire a contractor possibly to really reset them, either put the piece or pieces together. And it really takes somebody that's knowledgeable in that field. My professor from my grad school, that was her business, was just gravestone restoration. And that takes a lot of love and care and could take a lot of time sometimes. And you really have to be knowledgeable of what you're using, because as we know with preservation, if you do something wrong once, it might cause other dominoes down the line. So you want to double check, triple check before you even do anything that could harm something.
And I think with that, one thing people may or may not realize, so the roof that went onto the Cummings cabin, we actually applied for a CLG grant for that, didn't get it. And so we basically had to find the money out of our own revenue because, well, that cabin's roof really needed to be replaced, and we were, you know, at the end. So we worked with Public Works and sort of pulled together an amount of money. We call Matt, who works in the Public Works, tease him because everything he comes to us costs $25,000. He's like, $25,000. So we're like, how much is this? He's like, $25,000. So putting a roof on the tiniest of cabins was a very expensive, you know, production. So that is another part of the funding. It's not just grants. It's creating enough interest and enough excitement at your local level that then when it comes to the budget time, people are like, oh yeah, we need to put money in because we need to clean stones, we need to protect the cemetery, we need to put a new roof on. In emergency situations, you know, you're hoping that if a tree falls down in a hurricane, that you actually will be refunded by FEMA. But if it costs you $5,000 to $10,000 to take a tree up, and you don't get refunded for whatever purposes, you know, deciding that that's important comes from making it important all year round. You know, making it important when there isn't a disaster. So that's been, again, part of that planning piece, is just making it important, and then you can get the funding.
But I also add another point to that. So the old roof that we had, it had a lot of moss and biogrowth on it. And I went up into the attic. It kind of brought me back to my school days when I would go into the attic all dark and everything and be like, had my flashlight. And there were some holes in the roof, and so we had to fix it. So after we got the roof on, we were looking at it and said, why is this always wet? You know, you want to make sure the shingles have time to dry. You don't want them always be constantly wet. And then we're looking, and there was a tree canopy always constantly over the cabin that was dropping the leaves, the pine needles, keeping it all wet, and it was pretty much creating a whole shaded area where the sun couldn't get in. So we worked with Public Works again and trimmed the trees away so the sun could get through and help, you know, dry it out so it's not, so the shingles aren't constantly a sponge.
Anything else you want to say? I will tell you that when I hired Gabe, I interviewed him, and then I took him to the basement of the White House that's over at the Meadows. And everyone was like, why are you taking him into the basement of an old home? And I said, well, he's a historic preservation guy. If I don't take him into some sort of weird attic or down into a dungeon, he'll probably never come work for us. So it worked, and now we've had many wonderful years working together to do all this. But we'll just talk a little bit about our ongoing and future projects. We are hoping, like Gabe mentioned, tree monitoring is now part of our regular process, since Hurricane Helene really emphasized how important that is. This spring and summer, we're going to have cleaning workshops. Now that we have, you know, how to do things in a manual, we definitely want to make sure that the community's involved with cleaning the markers as well. And then one of the things that we want to do is really create a historic narrative. And that is storytelling, that's history of the different sites, different graves, and we applied for another grant that we didn't get, and that would really have been to hire that person to really tell the stories. But what we did get is we, kind of like I talked about at the muster grounds, we got a Virginia 250 grant. It was $10,000. And so we purchased a program called Bandwango. Funny little name, but what it does is it essentially gamifies walking tours. that can gamify history, basically. So when you come into town with your family, you can go by the visitor center and they can say, hey, we have this really amazing program that you can go on your phone and you can go to all these different sites and you click in and you hear a story or you read something about one of the stones, and then at the end of all that, come back here and we'll give you a prize. And so we can actually get local businesses to provide the prizes, so that if somebody completes the walking tour and learns about all of the different stones and all of the different sites in town, one, they're learning something, but two, we're actually creating a gift for them and also working with the businesses. So from that, we found that you can use these little QR codes that are on basically stakes. So rather, you're not having to attach anything to a historic stone, you're not having to kind of worry about, well, how are they gonna find that information? You just place it next to the stone, they have a QR code, and then they can hear a whole story. So Donna Marie could do a series of stories on the stones, and I keep saying that somebody in the future will use it next to their own stone to terrify their children from the grave. Yeah, that's the idea. Our idea is really, working across all of the different departments. And I think that might be the message that is most important here, is that none of this work is siloed. So if you're in town management or planning or public works or historic preservation or the tourism department, coming on board to help us create a historic walking tour, not being siloed. And Jessica back there behind the screen, making us a wonderful website for Adopt a Plot. The key thing is to not be siloed, to make sure that you're talking across all of the different departments, finding out what everybody does, and then all coming together to come up with a solution. Because you have to have tough conversations. Again, when we started this with Public Works and the bag of chipped stones, it was a very, very tense environment. It was very painful, and we were sort of all, it was like, wow, okay, how do we get past those emotions? How do we get to, yeah, okay, well, we're angry, you're angry. However, talking to the fire department, they said that years before, the whole entire cemetery was completely covered. And the fire department had come out and basically removed all of the brush and all of the things that had grown up. And so you think, oh, okay, there's another department. The fire department was involved? And so, it takes everybody, it takes having really difficult conversations sometimes in historic preservation, but if it was there for 250 years, we're hoping that it's there for another 250 years. So that is our presentation for the cemetery master plan. I will say that Noah, who will be here to do his presentation at 4, he's actually talking about the African American side of the cemetery, and he took that on as a student project, and it is super fascinating. And so I think you guys can have a break, maybe walk around for 30 minutes, and then we'll all meet back here. Is there any questions?
Yeah, what circle is the African American section in?
So that is on a separate side. So
why?
We're segregated.
Yeah, segregation. What was
I don't understand what segregation is.
It was the time period.
Oh, I understand that too, but we can't integrate those together somehow.
Well, Russell Road goes through it now.
Yeah.
And so it just, now it's not there, there's a way to integrate that in a sense with what was there now. The odd thing that we thought was that, in my experience, is that usually the African American cemeteries are far away from the family or the white cemetery.
Right.
These were so close, so it was kind of a weird thing to see. But the more and more information we've seen, and we actually have, which we'll touch on a little bit here, we have 3 Buffalo Soldiers in the African American side, which, if you don't know what they are, they were a regiment strictly that were made of African Americans after Civil War. Yep. So that helped us with that and everything. So we're looking to do bios for everybody, tell the stories of them. We're also looking to tell the stories of the people that we have stones for on that side. And so, but I won't.
Yeah, don't give it all away.
I won't give it all away. But I'll just say it's worth staying for.
Yeah.
So yeah, are there any other questions? Yeah.
What
kind of guidelines do you all require for someone who wants to adopt a plot?
Sure. So our basic idea with that was to be very careful and use hand tools. So one of I think our biggest concerns that we saw was the size of equipment and the inability for, I mean, there's really very little equipment other than hand tools that you could actually use in those plots and be careful around the stones inside the interior ones that have the blocks around the outer edge. The rest of it, you know, and modern day cemeteries are obviously spaced apart enough so that they can simply mow between them. But, you know, when you look at this, and again, like Gabe talked about the shrink swell, I mean, you've got stones really close together, you've got different pieces that you can obviously tell that the ground has moved. And so when we put together a set of rules, I guess, to govern what an adopted plot would include, it was primarily the fact that you'd be careful with the tools that you were using, that you would regularly do maintenance, that you would attend and participate if we had larger.
You see me at the plot.
Yeah, that we have sort of, it's kind of like if you've ever adopted a garden plot, or if you've adopted a piece of a highway. It was basically that. However, we also have a clause in there that if you don't, if you adopted a plot and you didn't do anything with it, that we would assist and continue the maintenance. But it basically says, you know, Public Works doesn't have to go in there and just, you know, weed eat everything in sight. It really gives that special attention to it.
People have been pretty enthusiastic once they adopted one about following up with. That's a great thing.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I think that there's something about that. When it becomes yours, you know, you really have that. We haven't shamed anyone and said, like, you aren't keeping your plot in check. But, you know, it's just that idea that it's something that you can go out there and say, this is mine, I'm taking care of a piece of the community. And I think that was the other big piece that we wanted to emphasize was that, you know, it's a choice to be a part of historic preservation and a part of that. If the government can step in and basically do the bare minimum, but to actually take it to that next level, it takes people who care and want to be connected to history.
Perpetual care situations, cemeteries, it varies so much.
Mm-hmm. They do, and some of them, it seems like the ones that have been commercialized are the ones that seem to have the most care. It's a little tough, you know, it's not like this is part of a large park or a conservation area, or, you know, some of them end up kind of being wrapped into that where they'll have weddings occur, you know, wedding gazebos, and it's just like, hey, there's a historic cemetery as part of a large community park. This is rather isolated. It does, like Gabe say, have a road running right down the middle of it, separating the two sides, so.
Oh, I would like to add also, you were saying guidelines, we do have a do and don't sheet. So it kind of goes through, leave a buffer around the stone, and then use clippers to do it. Don't chemical products, so sometimes we, you know, it is an area where there's trees and everything and grass, so there's occasionally the poison oak or poison ivy that pops up. And so when that happens, I always make myself available, whether it's OH stuff or cemetery stuff, and I've had a few people say, hey, I have this on my stone or in this area, what can we do to help? So we researched to look for a weed killer that doesn't have any salts, doesn't have anything like that, so you're not letting any salt go into the soil and then back up into the stones.
So you're continually supporting all of it. It's not just you've got it, you take care of it, you'll actually support it. You know, that's great.
Yeah, so I'm always there if they have a question or they have a concern or whatever. I'm always available, and I go out and, you know, I go out there and look at it, and then, you know, we'll be doing a whole, just see how it went, and then I'm always in contact. We have a few volunteers from Adopt a Plot here, and, you know, they know that you send me an email, you get a response back pretty quick and everything. So.
Is there a guideline or a rule or just a presumption that the only thing that you'll grow there is grass? I mean,
No.
or is there?
We've talked about
some
other
creative,
things.
because I know
Yeah.
in Germany, for example, where I've traveled a good bit, the cemeteries are absolutely stunning because families, you know, keep them and they garden them. Ornamental, not vegetable gardening obviously, but ornamental gardening, and they're really, really beautiful.
We've talked about that. We haven't really had anyone who's said that they want to do that. We've also talked about different things like red clover that doesn't continue to grow, and a lot of the tough parts with, like, let's say we wanted to take all of the grass out and put in something that never grows taller than a half inch. is that you basically have to go in and kill everything and
Right, you
restart.
wanna do that, right.
And so it's complex with the stones, which I guess there was even some allusion to that this morning with how bricks absorb things, and so, you know, it's the same kind of idea, like Gabe was saying, like what is the stone gonna absorb if
Right.
they're, you know, if you're putting down chemicals, so, but, yeah, we haven't had anyone that really specifically wanted to put flowers or anything of that nature in, but.
We have reached out to, again, this is only the first year now, I'd say for first year, having 75 to 80% of the grade markers adopted was fantastic. We reached out to a few of the colleges and schools we have in there because they have garden clubs and everything. We didn't hear anything back, but we figured as like with this, we had it first year and now it's grown to even bigger, and we're hoping next year we can make those connections with those organizations and maybe have something happen in terms of those plantings. So.
We're open to it, we just haven't really.
Haven't had somebody that's come forward and said, I want to do it. So. Yes, sir.
Lexington, Virginia has a similar historic cemetery. It's managed by the town, by the city. And the cemetery consultant suggested that they consider farming out the maintenance because it would be a lot less costly than having, you know, Public Works do all the maintenance. Did you look at that at all?
We did. In fact, we hired somebody who said they wanted to do it, and he quit a week later. Yes, because we spend, I think, roughly between $20,000 and $40,000 a year just on that one section. So we thought, well, hey, why don't we give somebody a full-time job and they can come out here and they can use all their tools, and it's very tedious work. And so for one person to keep up with the 8 acres, it would probably take them mowing sort of every day constantly. Whereas we get a team of, you know, 10 people out there and can mow the whole thing every couple of weeks fairly quickly. But we've tried that. We put it out for a job, and in fact, when we tried it this time, everybody kind of laughed at us because they said they tried it in the past and the same thing had happened, and we said, well, we'll try it again. I mean, maybe people are different now, but no, same thing. Somebody was excited, they wanted the job, and then once they realized sort of the enormity of it, again, I think it's because it's not just getting on a mower and plowing back and forth, that, you know, the fact that the stones are irregularly placed really creates that need to be very careful. And so, yeah, I think maybe one of the most impressive things is that we were able to convince our Public Works to change their, you know, their style of mowing. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and again, like when I was saying, it comes all down to connections, not only with the community, but with your fellow workers,
Yes.
because, you know, we all, every employee in the town, we all get along and everything, so we all want to help each other out. So I think having those connections, not only on community level, but also internally helps with all kinds of projects and make sure everything flows smoothly. It's also, you know, if we have something come up, I can easily call Matt and say, hey, I got a question, can you answer it? It's like that, so. Any other questions? I don't think so.
All right, well, we'll see you guys back here in 30 minutes.